and berries. All right, let's see if we can get this to work. Right, let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Morning, Carl.
Morning, morning. How are you?
All good. All good.
Good, good. So I see I put evening on the invite, 8:30 tonight. That's why we had some confusion. Good. How are you doing? Morning, all.
Morning, Carl.
Donovan, morning.
Morning, morning. How are you?
I'm good.
Hello, Carl.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. Still a bit tired.
A bit tired. Why?
You'll have to remove your video.
Sorry, what? Okay, let's wait for a couple of others. It's still early.
No problem.
Did you guys get the slides?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we got it.
So, yeah, I've got it.
Okay, that's cool. That's good. Right, good. Right. Okay, we've got quite a few people. We've got 12 so far. Let's see. Now, the question is, will the people who are usually late for class be late for the session as well? I'm assuming yes. Right. Okay, we've got 13. Okay, there's Musa. There's Roxy. So we've got Right, let's give it another minute or two and then we can kick off. If we got... Okay, let's see, we've got... What's happening with Musa? Okay, there's 1, 2. Okay. Guys, I think for the next one we need to remember the Wits dress code. No jeans, no tackies, no shorts, no t-shirts. Says me in my slippers.
Morning, Carl. Morning, guys.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, thanks, and yourselves.
Good, thank you. Guys, we're sitting with 16. Here's Larisha. That'll make it 17. So we're getting close. There are a couple of people who can't join, who are working. Example. Okay, it's Pam, which is here already. Okay.
I didn't say good morning, everybody. Sorry. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fabulous. And how are you doing?
Yeah, good. Glad to hear we've got an extra 2 weeks leave.
No.
Hey, shit.
I'm about to poke my own eyeballs out.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I think it's the right thing to do, but it's really tough. Jeez.
It is. Financially as well. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, I know. And that's what, yeah, very tough. And there's a lot sort of going through on Twitter, etc., and on the different news channels about whether one should actually do the extension or not, that you're going to do damage to the economy. I personally think it is the right thing to do, but then everybody's got to help those who need help so that basically we can keep everyone going through this period. And then obviously afterwards, we need to make sure that there's plans for those people to get jobs if they've lost jobs, to recover some earnings if they haven't been able to earn. So yeah, I do think it's the right thing, but it's a very tough action to take.
It is indeed.
Right, we're doing well. We're sitting on 22. So we are doing well. All right, let's give it another couple of minutes and then we can kick off.
Morning. Hi, Carl.
Morning, morning. Who's that?
Morning. Larisha.
Larisha, good. You're logged on and all working.
Yay.
Well done. That's
Thanks, Carl, for the setup.
well, pleasure. Let's hope we can all keep going for a good few hours this morning.
Yeah. How's your Good Friday?
My Good Friday, what was my Good Friday? Was good. It was relaxing. I took the day off. I did lots of reading. The others, how was your Friday?
Yeah.
That's good.
Oh, good. Okay, cool. Good, good.
Oh, everyone's here.
Morning, Carl.
Morning, morning. How are you, Sento?
No, I'm good, Carl.
Yeah, good. Guys, I think we've kind of got everybody, haven't we? There may be a couple of others. I know there's some that are working today, so they can't join. They'll get the recording. This thing is recording. Yes, it is, which is good. Okay. All right. All right, I think I'm going to start. Let's start. And let me just share my screen so that we can start looking at the slides. Where are we? That's what I want. Let's just see. No, that's not what I want. Okay. Let's do this. I thought I had it. There we go. Okay. Share screen. All right. Can everybody there see my slides?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start off with a kind of a quick recap. I just need to do this. Let me just do this for a second. Just want to check there. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, cool. Right, so let's go for a bit of a recap. Okay, so we started off right at the beginning. Many Saturdays ago, we did an introduction to the program, etc. We put you into syndicates. You came up with that list of the skills, which gave us our onion model. And we talked about that. And we talked about that basically we were going to focus on the behavior layer and on the technical functional layer on the NMP. This is why we do marketing and finance and managing resources and project management and operations. But for my module and for business communication, we're looking more at the behavior layer. We talked about the personality. Personality is not right or wrong, but that basically you need to understand this because it impacts on behavior. We said we were going to focus on 3 broad areas of competence. We were going to look at the thinking skills. We were going to look at interpersonal skills and leadership competencies. And that's basically where we started. We started with the thinking competencies. We then moved a little bit onto leadership. We haven't yet done interpersonal. We need to finish off leadership and we need to go into interpersonal. Let's just see that. Okay, let's just see that. All right. Okay. I'm just trying to see something here. Chat. Okay. All right. And so basically that's where we started. We talked about thinking skills, and with the thinking skills, you remember we started off with that Aztec case study and you had to work through it, and then you looked at it in your syndicates, and we used Aztec to show, well, I used Aztec to show how we would actually use the thinking skills in reality. But then I also used Aztec to move on to the leadership side. So let me just do that. We did thinking skills. We did types of questions. We did the 10-step model. So all of that we have covered. And then we used the Aztec to go on to leadership. And I gave you that in syndicate saying, given what you understand about Aztec, tell me how you would manage and lead the organization. And that took us onto a discussion, moved us from thinking skills onto interpersonal skills. Sorry, onto leadership skills. We talked about firstly leadership style, autocratic or the more directive style, participative, democratic, laissez-faire. Guys, all happy with that?
Yes.
And then you assessed your own leadership style and looked at whether you were more directive or participative or laissez-faire. We then moved on to another discussion still around leadership. And now it was most organizations are overmanaged, underled, from Peter Drucker. And we looked at then what are managements, what's management stuff, what's leadership stuff. And the conclusion is we need to do both, not one or the other, but that we tend, if we look at his statement, to do more on management than on leadership. And we need to kind of balance that off more. But that's pretty much what we did. We then went on to leadership pipeline, where we have to manage, self-manage, others manage, managers, etc. The core issue being is each time we move, and in fact, before we move, what we should be doing is making transitions to prepare ourselves for that next level. And what I said to you is, if you look at the NMP program, what are we trying to do? Is we're working very much on assisting people with transition 1 and transition 2. And I said that basically, if you're going to make transition 1 and 2, you need to be good at certain core competencies. You need to be able to guide and direct people. You need to be able to delegate, motivate, empower, develop people, and monitor and control. And there's probably a whole lot more that you need to be able to do, but that's a pretty good start. And if you can do those things, you're not doing a bad job. I also said that if I was writing an exam somewhere in the future, I would know that list very well and write it down. And I think you guys did do that. So we've got that. All happy so far?
Yes.
Okay. We then talked about how do we go about managing and directing, and that's where we did the model where you have to, what was it? It was the Hernsey-Blanchard model, where it is directing, coaching, supporting, delegating, and saying that you as the manager need to be able to identify the competence level of your staff, and you need to be able to use the style that is appropriate for that competence level. And I gave you a questionnaire which measured your natural style, and I got those who are managing people to assess their people and their competence level, and then we could compare your style to that competence level. All right, and that was very much a model which helps us to direct, guide people. It tells us how to delegate appropriately, and the key issue is it is the role of the line manager to assess the competence level of the people and to basically adjust your style to suit the needs of the people. Happy with that?
Yes.
Okay. And then we talked about on that model of Hernsey-Blanchard, where you've got directing, coaching, supporting, delegating, that axis across the bottom there is the competence level of your people. It can be very low or it can go to very high. But on the side axis, the y-axis, there was also the issue of relationship. And that was about understanding that at different stages, you need to focus more attention on the relationship you have with people. And basically, that just brings me back here, the relationship, and depending on where your people are in terms of that, you may need to focus more attention on the relationship. Really what that means is you need to focus more on getting people to want to do the job. Remember, if you've got people sitting where you're using a directing style, usually they know they want to do the job, they don't know how. And what you are trying to do is to teach them how to. So you'll focus on getting them to know how. You don't have to focus on getting them to want to. But by the time you're sitting and using a coaching style or a supporting style, the top two, basically there it is more about getting them to want to, because they kind of know how to. And so what Hernsey-Blanchard were doing is they were trying to answer the criticism of their model in the early days, which said, this is a great model, but what if somebody's not motivated? And so they built in that additional axis saying, yeah, okay, when you are using a coaching or a supporting style, then basically it is more about getting people to want to, not so much about how to. Are we happy with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what they then did, and they basically said you focus more or less on the relationship, and that's trying to answer the motivation question. My view is that kind of answers it, but I think there's a lot more to it. And when we last met, I left you with a question of saying, tell me why money does not motivate. Okay, and basically I'll usually get a whole lot of responses on why money does not motivate, and I'll always get at least a couple of people who say, but they believe that money does motivate. And as I would have said, you have the right to your views, but you need to tell me why money does not motivate. And basically the answer there is not that money is or is not a motivator, but it leads me nicely into a model which says that money is not a motivator. Okay, and let me share the screen again. And now we start looking at issues around motivation. Okay. And I did send some video on that. I don't know if it worked very well, but basically we now start looking at motivation and theories on motivation. So we've talked about how to guide people. We've talked about how to direct people. We've talked about how to delegate. We've talked about management versus leadership. We've talked about leadership pipeline. We now start saying, well, let's understand motivation. And basically, we look at a number of different theories. And the first one I want to cover is the theory on Herzberg. All right. And these are all in your notes. We've got Herzberg, we've got Maslow, etc., etc. But let's start off with Herzberg, and let's talk about his view in terms of motivation. So Herzberg has an interesting view. He says if you're looking at motivation, you cannot look at motivation as something that is 0 to plus. As much as a person can be motivated, that person can also be demotivated. So you've got to look at what motivates, and you also have to look at what demotivates. And he says those are two different factors or two different issues. What motivates a person is different to what demotivates a person. In other words, what takes you up is different to what pulls you down. And he says, therefore, you've got to see motivation as a vertical scale, but it doesn't go from 0 to plus. It goes from 0 to plus, but it can also go from 0 to minus. So you've kind of got this middle point. You can go up from that middle point or down from that middle point. So that's your 0 point. At this 0 point or middle point, you're neutral. I'm not happy. I'm not unhappy. Some things take me up and some things take me down. What takes me from 0 to plus is what he calls motivational factors. What takes me from 0 to minus is what he would call hygiene factors. So the key thing with Herzberg that we need to remember is the difference between motivational factors and hygiene factors. What takes you up, motivational factors, is different to what takes you down, which are hygiene factors. And basically he says money is an example of a hygiene factor. Okay, so money is not a motivator according to him, but it is a demotivator. But you need to understand it in his context, or in the context that he's talking about. And again, it's important for me to say that actually Herzberg's theory is not really a theory on money. It's just a way that I can grab people's attention. Money is one example of a hygiene factor. And what is he saying? If I am well paid, if I am fairly paid, if I'm paid as I think I should be, I am neutral. I'm not happy. I expect to be well paid. We all expect to be fairly paid. So money does not motivate me. But if I feel that I am underpaid, or if I find out, my usual example, if I find out that I'm paid less than the other faculty at Wits Business School, I will be seriously unhappy. Okay. So if I am paid less than I think I should be, or less than my colleagues are paid, I will be seriously unhappy. If I'm well paid or I'm paid fairly, I expect to be paid fairly. So money doesn't motivate me. It doesn't take me from 0 to plus, but it sure as hell will take me from 0 to minus if it is not what it should be. So in that sense, he is saying money is a hygiene factor. It's not a motivational factor. And what it is also saying is that money, if you have a look at it, according to him, yes, if a person gets a nice bonus, they get a nice increase, they feel good for a week or two, but then the money's gone. So it's a short-term thing at best. However, let's remember his theory is not about money, it's about hygiene versus motivation. What takes people up is different to what takes people down. So one example of a hygiene factor is money. Another example of a hygiene factor would be bureaucracy, red tape, poor communication, lack of tools. These are the things that take a person from 0 to minus. The best way I can describe a hygiene factor is these are the things that frustrate a person. These are the things that we go home and we bitch and moan and complain about, right? They are our hygiene factors. And it is, as I've already said, it's usually there's red tape in the company, there's bureaucracy, nobody tells me what's going on, I can't do my job, I don't have the right tools, the computer system is too slow. Those are the things that frustrate people and take them from 0 to minus. What takes people from 0 to plus, in other words, the motivational factors, are usually different. Those are usually things like achievement and satisfaction and enjoyment and praise and recognition. So basically, what we need to do when managing people is we need to know, and when we want to motivate them, we need to know what are the things that are frustrating my people, what are the things that are motivating my people. What are my staff going home and complaining about? What are my staff going home and talking excitedly about? What are the hygiene factors? What are the motivational factors? And what that therefore means I've got to do, or you've got to do as a manager of people, is simple to say, not simple to do, but in simple terms, we need to minimize the hygiene and maximize the motivation. All right, and I use the word minimize. I'd like to use the word eliminate. I'd like to say, well, as a manager, you must just eliminate everything that's frustrating your staff, and the chances are that you can't do that. Many of us are working in large organizations. There's company policies and procedures and rules, and we cannot just eliminate those things. There may be a lack of communication. My staff don't know what's going on. A decision hasn't been made, and it's not my fault. It hasn't been made by the people above me, and I cannot just eliminate that. So what we try to do is minimize hygiene. Are there frustrations? Are there factors that are bugging my people that I can try and reduce or eliminate? But usually I can minimize, I can improve communication, I can give them more feedback. But what I can also do is not only must I minimize the hygiene, but I need to maximize the motivation. What are those things that cause my people to go home at the end of the day and talk excitedly about? Today was good because. And usually that will relate to, I achieved something, I was recognized, I was praised, I enjoyed what I did, there was a really great challenge, I'm being developed, I'm being groomed. So really, what are we doing to minimize? What are we doing to maximize? To minimize and maximize means, before I can do that, I need to know what those factors are. I need to know what's bugging my people, right? And that therefore means I better know my people, because I better understand what it is that those factors are. And quite often I get the concern, or I'm concerned that managers don't even know what those frustrations are. Do we know the hygiene factors? Do we know the motivational factors? Another thing that this says to me, and it's not always true, but there's usually a lot of truth to this, is you will usually find that the hygiene factors tend to be fairly common amongst all your staff. And they won't always be totally common. Right? Some people are like a lot of communication, some people are not that interested. But if there's a lack of communication, if there's a lack of direction, if there's a lack of decision making, if the computer system is too slow, the chances are it will bug most, if not all, of my people. So they usually have a commonality amongst them. Motivational factors tend to be a little bit more individual, because one person likes a challenge, and another one likes feedback, and another one wants involvement, and another one wants participation. So they can be common, but you usually find commonality with hygiene and individual differences with motivation. Okay, guys, let me stop there. Are there any questions? And I think if we can also use the chat, that if you've got something that you want to ask, you can chat. Any questions so far?
No, I'm fine.
Well, fine.
Yeah.
Okay, not from me, but yeah. All right, cool. So guys, just chip in and ask questions when you need to. Okay, so basically we've got to minimize hygiene, maximize motivational. And Herzberg would have been saying that money is an example of a hygiene factor, therefore it is not a motivator, but it is a demotivator. And again, please understand, you don't have to accept all of these theories. I believe that there is merit to every single one of these theories. There's merit to Herzberg. What are the hygiene, what are the motivational, but it's not perfect. Now let's have a look again at money without just sticking to money, but it's an interesting concept. So Herzberg says money is not a motivator, but it is because it is a hygiene factor, not a motivational factor. Okay, cool, that I can understand. However, a question that comes through my mind is that, okay, that's cool, that makes sense, but what about your guy, your typical person, guy or girl, who's working in sales, right? Your sales consultant, your rep. Surely those people are purely working for money. Usually they get a small basic and then they earn based on commission. And if that's the case, well, then surely that's motivating them. The money is motivating them. And therefore you could say, but Herzberg, what are you talking about? Because money is a motivator for your person who's in sales. Interestingly, if you had to say to Herzberg, what about your salesperson, your sales consultant? He would say money is still not a motivator. He would say, and it's very important we understand this, he would say money is a mover. So it becomes a semantic debate. In other words, it becomes about wording and then how you define these words. He would say money is not a motivator, but it is a mover. In other words, what he is saying is with money, you can get people off their backside and get them to go and do more. All right. So that guy who's selling motor cars, he'll go and sell an extra one because if he sells one more, it means that much money. Herzberg would say, yes, I agree, but money is not a motivator, it is a mover. It gets the guy off his backside to go and do that. So again, we go back to the semantics. We have to understand what does he mean, or how does he define the word motivation? he defines the word motivation as an inner passion, a desire to do something, wanting to go and do that. And he says money doesn't make people want to, it makes them do it, but it doesn't give them that passion. All right? And again, you can accept or not accept, but I think there's merit to what you say. If I go back into my career when I was a lot younger, I can remember one of my first real jobs was working as a consultant, and we ran training programs for this company. And my boss in those days, who owned the business, had an interesting way of paying us consultants. And basically what he did is he gave us a salary each month, and for our salary, we had to do 13 days a month in the classroom. All right, we had to run 13 days of training per month, and we got our salary. If we did less than 13 days, he deducted from our salary. So we would lose money if we did not hit our 13-day target. And that was painful. However, for every day over 13, there was a nice extra payment. And I can guarantee you at the age of 27, I used to do anything from 27 to 30 days a month training. Right? And the reason why is because I have a calculator in my head. I was 27 years old, and I could work out that if I did one of those and one of those, that would equal a big screen TV, and one of those and one of those would equal something else. So that moved me to do as many days as possible. Saturdays, Sundays, public holidays, you would see me train. And if you had to see me on a Sunday morning at 6:30 in the morning driving to a training venue, was I motivated? Was I happy? Or would I rather still be in bed or be on a golf course? I'd much rather still have been in bed or on the golf course. Was I, however, in my car driving to the training program? Yes, I was. Why? Because one of those and one of those equaled big screen TV. So what Herzberg would be saying is Carl was not motivated, but he was moved. You got him out of bed, into his car, and he was moved to go and do this. And that's basically how he would argue or answer the comment about what about your typical sales guy. And that's pretty much Herzberg in terms of saying money is not a motivator, but it is a move. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. And again, I think we've got to come back to what does that mean for you as managers of people? What does it mean is you've got to know what are the hygiene factors, what are the motivational factors, what are you doing to minimize, what are you doing to maximize. However, I take it even further in my mind, and I'm saying, okay, cool, Herzberg makes sense. So far, he even answers my question around your typical sales guy, but there's something else we need to remember with Herzberg, and that is where he comes from. Now, he was, and again, I can never remember, but he was either German or Swedish. In other words, he comes very much from a first world country. And if you have a look at that, and I think it was Sweden, but if you have a look at it, as I usually say, in Sweden, your unemployment level is close to zero. Your social support in Sweden is seriously good. You're sitting in a really, really first world country. Basically, if a person doesn't have a job, they'll find a job for them. That's why there's close to zero unemployment. Housing is given if people do not have a house. Medical is free. Education for children is free. In fact, they have a decrease in population, so they give you a certain bonus each year for how many children you have. The point that I'm making is with that kind of environment where I've got a house, I've got education, I've got medical, and I've got a job, well, then money probably is less important. If we look at South Africa prior to coronavirus, our unemployment level was sitting at about 29%, and post-coronavirus, it's going to be a lot higher. So that means we are not sitting in a first world country, we're sitting in a developing country. And therefore, we have issues like unemployment. We have millions of people who are battling to feed themselves, to clothe themselves, to take care of their families. So what I'm saying here is as much as I see merit to Herzberg, and there is merit to Herzberg, we have to understand that basically we are not sitting in a first world country. We are sitting where we've got those challenges. So how do we deal with that? Because surely, if I'm just trying to put food on the table and I'm just trying to put clothes on my children's back, surely money becomes that much more of an issue. So I think there's merit to Herzberg. I think you need to understand it and you need to be able to apply it, but we need to understand there's certain restrictions to Herzberg given that we do not live in a first world environment. And the best way that I can understand it is I say, let's take Herzberg, you've got your middle point, things go up and things go down. And I say on top of Herzberg, we need to overlay Maslow. All right, so you almost need to see these two drawings on top of each other. You've got Herzberg with his middle point up and down, and then on top of that you have to overlay Maslow. Now most of us are very familiar with Maslow and his hierarchy of needs, that he says basically there's a hierarchy. You don't worry about level 2 until you satisfied level 1, and level 3 until you satisfied 1 and 2. And so basically I'm saying if you ever look at the levels of Maslow, the first level, I think, as you all know, is what we would call the physiological need, the need for food,
Yes.
shelter, clothing, etc. The next level after that or above that would be safety and security. So the first level is I need food and clothing. The next one is I need to feel safe. The third one is then what they call social or belonging. In other words, this is where the person has got the food and shelter. They have feeling safe, and now they worry about a higher order need, which is a sense of belonging. I want to stay where my community stays. I want to stay where my family stays. I want to feel like I belong. And that's level 3. And what he's saying is you're not going to worry about level 2 until you've satisfied 1. You're not going to worry about 3 until you've satisfied 1 and 2, etc. Level 4 is self-esteem, all right? And level 5 is self-actualization. And really what I'm saying is if we overlay Maslow on top of Herzberg, those first 2 layers, all right? If those first 2 layers are not satisfied, if a person does not have basic needs taken care of and safety taken care of, the chances are they're going to be particularly worried about money. Okay, in other words, I need to be able to put a roof over my head, I need to put food in my children's belly, and I need to have clothes on my back. And that basically, I think, is something we have to take into consideration. Thus, Herzberg makes sense in a first world when we're sitting in a developing country. If those first 2 layers are not satisfied, we're going to have money being more and more of an issue. Okay, guys, does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does. Carl, just a question from my side.
Yeah.
Actually, not really a question, but I think with your example of a TV set, it kind of like the answer, but I think it's worth mentioning. When we were talking about the motivational factors versus the hygiene factors, I made some notes. You mentioned that the motivational factors will be praise and recognition. But then what I did, I added a third one and said reward. Because when I look at my organization at a bank, we got what we call initiative that we call Beyond Excellence. If somebody goes an extra mile, if somebody does something beyond what they're getting paid for and all that, they get a reward, and it's monetary. So I was thinking now, therefore, does it fall under motivational factor? But I think you answered that question by saying it's a mover instead of a motivator.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. So because basically one would, or if you had to speak to Herzberg, he would say it's a mover. All right. And that's an interesting point, which I think we need to talk about. If we go back to my boss in those early days where I got paid for the number of days training, if you had to say to him, Carl is doing 27 days a month, is he motivated? He would say, sure, he's highly motivated, right? He's highly motivated. If you had to say to Herzberg, is Carl motivated? He'd say, no, he's moved. So it's an interesting point. It comes back to the value system of the company. Right? For my boss, he was motivated. In the pure Herzberg sense, he was moved, but it depends on the value system. Now, most companies, many companies like yours have incentive schemes, you know what I mean? You do this, you get some money. And in the pure definition, Herzberg would say yes, but that's not really a motivational scheme, it's a movement scheme. And really it comes down to what is the value of the organization. Did this boss of mine care? He would say, I don't care how passionate Carl is, I care about how many days he did, and he better do them well. Okay, does that kind of make sense? I think it's an important point. In his mind, I was motivated. In Herzberg's mind, he would have said I was moved. It depends on what the values of the organization are. Okay, good question. Any other questions, guys?
Carl?
Yeah.
Okay, hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, you know, for me, I think in this issue of the motivation, I think most of the organization, they have not, I feel like they do not have a mechanism to incorporate it into the performance management system. As for the example of Kogiso, let's say that, like for instance, like in our organization, when we do the performance management, we've got a 5-scale rating, whereby 3, it means we have met the requirements. But between 4 and 5, that means we must submit proof for you going an extra mile. So you see, mostly the organization do not have that that motivation factor being incorporated into the, I don't know.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Okay, I think that's again an interesting question. We're going to look at performance management a bit later, but I think it's a valid point now, is that if you're looking at motivation and you're looking at hygiene versus motivational factors, and you're linking it to ratings, and to get a 4, I need to be able to justify certain things. To get a 5, I've got to justify things. It does tend to lead more to the fact that what we're trying to do in our organizations quite often is move people, not necessarily motivate people. The other challenge that we have is, as a line manager, it becomes quite difficult to reward people in your large organization through that performance management system. But we are going to talk about performance management a little bit later.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, guys? Is this making sense?
Yep.
I just want to check here. Okay, all right. Okay, cool. Bantu, I hear you. I read your comment. I will come back to that in a moment. Okay, just remind me. Okay, good question though. All right, cool. So basically, what have we got so far? We've got a theory on Herzberg, there's merit. We've got a theory on Maslow, been around for many years, there's merit. Let's just finish Maslow though. So what am I saying? I'm saying merit to Maslow, if a person is sitting at those first 2 layers where we're sitting at physiological needs, if I'm sitting at safety needs, money is an issue, guys. I don't care what you're going to, how interesting the job is. If I can't feed myself, I just want to know what are you going to pay. And I think what we're going to find post-coronavirus is that's going to become even more of an issue that we are dealing with. So let's just understand that, because if we look at it in terms of Maslow, and we look at it in terms of South Africa and Africa everywhere, because I see the same in Uganda and Tanzania and in Kenya, is we are sitting with a large portion of the people working for us who are sitting at that level 1 and level 2. All right, physiological needs and safety needs. And we know this all too well, and you probably know it even better than I do. We have that person who working at sort of a junior level in organization in South Africa, and her life is pretty tough because she has to wake up probably at 3 o'clock in the morning to be able to put together some food for her children. She leaves for work. She catches transport 1, transport 2, transport 3 just to be able to get to work. She still gets to work late. She's still in trouble for being late. She then has to work all day. She leaves. She catches many forms of transport just to get home. She probably gets home at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. Then she's got to feed the family, take care of the family, get some sleep to be able to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning again. And that is really, really tough. Now, if she's coming to work late, that doesn't justify the lateness, but it does mean we need to have a bit of empathy and understanding for people, because, hey, that's not easy. And yet you so often find managers are, oh, but you were late. Yes, I know that. But how do we try and at least understand it? And I'm not saying we must perhaps compromise our company policies, but hey, guys, if you're managing people, we have to understand that it's tough out there, and it's going to become tougher. All right, but let's go back. Maslow, you've got to satisfy 1 before 2 and 2 before 3, etc., etc. And then level 3, as I say, is belonging. Level 4 is self-esteem. Self-esteem, which is basically, let me just do that. It is basically, usually you'll see self-esteem tends to be quite a lot more around ego, all right? So it's about what have I got, look at me, what have I achieved? And so it's quite an interesting way. The way I understand it, right or wrong, is if I try and understand Maslow, I look at it in terms of housing, right? And in Africa, it's quite a sad story. But if I am in Africa, somewhere in Africa, anywhere in Africa, and I am destitute, I am on the street, I have nowhere to stay, I do not even have a roof over my head, and when it rains, I sleep in the rain. And if that person is destitute, basically you say to them, what is it that you need? They will say to you, the only thing I need, the only thing I'm worried about, the only thing I'm focusing on is a roof over my head. Just give me a shack. Just give me somewhere where I can be dry at night. In other words, that's your basic physiological. Right? And once they have got this roof over their head and they dry at night, then they move from level 1 to level 2. Now they at least want to be safe. Right now, I don't just want a roof over my head. I don't just want to be dry when I go to sleep at night. I want to be able to lock myself in. I want to be safe. I want to be able to lock myself in. So now I just need a roof over my head, but I need some kind of walls around me. I need to be able to lock myself in. I need to be safe. I need to know that when I go to work and I come home, my few possessions are still there, right? So now we've gone to level 2, which is that sense of safety. And once I can tick the first box and I can tick the second box or second level, I've got a roof and I've got a safe place, then I go to level 3. And this is where I want to have, I want to stay where my friends stay. I want to stay in my community. I want to stay where the church is. I want to stay where my family is. So now we've gone to a different layer, which is about a sense of belonging. I can tick the first level, I can tick the second level. Now I want to stay where my friends are, my community, my church, my family. And basically that's level 3. Level 4 of Maslow then gets to self-esteem. And let me ask a question. What is important in terms of self-esteem? What is that all about? Who would like to hazard a guess?
I can't.
Yes,
Yeah, I think self-esteem will do more about confidence.
Okay, elaborate on that, Senzo, when you say confidence.
I mean, it's whereby a person is confident about his decision.
Okay,
or about.
Yeah, you do find there's confidence coming in. Good. What else? So what else is that would we find with someone where self-esteem is their core need? They are more confident. I agree with that. What else? Other ideas?
Okay. Okay. I think also it also has to do with good planning as well.
Sorry, say that again, Senzo. It has about?
I'm saying about the planning skills.
Yeah, possibly there's planning skills, possibly there's confidence. Mpo, I see you say job satisfaction. You put that into the chat. Good. Any other ideas? When I am sitting at a level of self-esteem, what is important to me? Or what is important to the person? Yes.
I would say it's wanting to be accepted by a group of people. That is a lot of, I think, got to do with self-esteem. Because once you're accepted, at least like that's where Senzo was saying, your confidence level is obviously a lot more up there.
Okay, cool. Tell me about accepted. In what way?
Within, well, if we're going to look at work-wise, if you're accepted by the group of people that you are, at least you know that you're liked, that your opinion counts for some sort of extent. If you weren't accepted, you wouldn't feel much of yourself at the end of the day.
Okay. Okay, it's interesting. And if you look at what you and Senzo are saying, you're talking about confidence and self-esteem, and there is a link in the theory of the words of self-esteem and confidence. However, if we look at Maslow and self-esteem, all right, self-esteem tends, interestingly enough, to be quite a bit about ego. All right, and it's not so much about being accepted, strangely enough. We'll see another model, Roxy, on acceptance, which is going to come just now. But it tends to be more about ego. It's more about look at me, look what I've achieved, look what I've done. So your basic need is I need a roof over my head, then I need a safe roof over my head, then I need to stay where my buddies stay. If we follow that argument of mine, in terms of housing, all right, if I'm sitting at self-esteem, where do I want to live now? Remember, I just wanted a roof over my head. Then I wanted a safe place to stay. Then I wanted to stay where my buddies stay. Where do I want to live now?
In the high class areas, for example, you want to be up there.
Yes.
I understand.
Now that's where we're starting to see a bit of the ego, right? So now at the at the sense of belonging, I just wanted to stay where my buddies are, and this is being a little bit flippant, but basically now the guy wants to stay where his buddies cannot afford to stay. All right.
Yeah.
In other words, now he wants to have the nicest house in that neighborhood, or he wants to stay in the neighborhood where his buddies can't afford to stay. In other words, and it's not a bad thing necessarily, but basically, let me just do that. Basically, it is about look at me. All right, look at what I have achieved. I want to stand out above the rest. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. People who are sitting at self-esteem might not always be the nicest people, right? But they work very, very hard to get to a stage where they can afford the nice house, they can drive the nice car, they can take the nice holidays, that type of thing. So that tends to be your level 4. There tends to be a bit of ego. There tends to be status coming in there. This is where the house becomes important, what I drive becomes important, etc., etc. Guys, is this making sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And again, those people are not always the nicest, but as I say, hey, they work very, very hard to be able to get to that level. So that's level 4. That's your self-esteem. Level 5 is an interesting one of Maslow, and that is self-actualization, having an understanding of self-esteem. Any ideas? What is self-actualization about?
Would you say self-actualization is wanting more at the end of the day?
But more of what?
More of yourself.
Say that again, sorry.
Like more growth wherever you are in I don't know. So say now I was like a manager, I wanted to be an MD type of thing, or even high, like CEO level type of growth opportunity. Once you expect more because you feel, because you've got that ego, I don't know if I'm trying to make sense.
Okay. Nicolette, I see you say growth, and Roxanne, you saying growth, you want more. Any other ideas?
Okay, hi, Carl.
Yep. Hi, Senzo.
Yeah, I think self-actualization, for me, I think it will be a stage whereby a person will be like doing things that he enjoy most, like maybe for example, like giving back to the community.
Yeah, correct. Okay, good. So I'm seeing things like education, giving back to the community, etc. And that's very much what self-actualization is. We tend to find with self-actualization, there can still be some ego, but it's less about ego. It's less about me. And it's usually about giving something back or being as good as I can be. So education is there, growth is there, or we say fulfillment is quite correct. In other words, I want to be as good as I can. And whether people notice it doesn't matter. It's not about look at me. It's usually about, can I know as much about that topic as possible? So this is where the person wants to be the real expert in their field, not to stand or to be recognized by others, but just to be really good at what they do. They want to grow, they want to develop, they want to quite often make a contribution to society. So quite often, if we're going back to my example, this is where they're less worried about what they drive and more worried about how they contribute to others, how they help others. Another key word that you often find with self-actualization is legacy. What am I leaving behind? What difference am I making? And I see somebody saying there, it's not about money. It tends to be a lot less about money, correct? It's more about what am I leaving behind? Am I as good as I can be? What difference am I making? And that tends to then be your self-actualization. And what we know, if you have a look always at Maslow, it's always this triangle, this hierarchy, meaning fewer people get to the top. So you've got a large number of people at the bottom, and so it gets smaller and smaller as we go to the top, meaning that not a lot of people will get to that self-actualization. And sometimes not that many people will get to self-esteem, so it gets smaller as we get to the top. Something else that is important is people quite often say the people who've got to self-actualization are people like Bill Gates and Patrice and, you know, those very wealthy people who can give a whole lot of money to society. And it is true that quite often the very wealthy are able to give back and to contribute and to leave a legacy. But it's not about wealth. It's not about the money. All right. So in other words, there's quite a lot of people who maybe never became the millionaires, but they make a real difference and a real contribution to society. They do stuff for their community. They make a real difference. And that would be self-actualization. One of the best examples that I can think of is Nelson Mandela. All right, he basically was released from prison. He became the president. And one of the first things he did when he became the president was he started the Nelson Mandela's Children's Fund. He took, I don't know what, a third or half of his salary, and that went to start the Nelson Mandela's Children's Fund. So for Madiba, it was always about how do I make a difference? How do I contribute to society? How do I help people? So in other words, he was sitting right at that self-actualization. And here I'm always naughty in saying this, but with all due respect, Nelson Mandela was never, ever worried about Nkandla. Eh? That was never his issue. Okay, but let me. Okay, guys, is this making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So what are we saying here? And I need to come back to that question of, so how do we use this in an exam? Let's go back to so what we've got is we've covered two basic models. We're saying there's Herzberg, hygiene, motivational, and then there's Maslow, which is your hierarchy of needs. And bottom line, with both models, there is merit. There is merit to Herzberg. You, as a manager, supervisor of people, need to know what a hygiene, motivational, so you can motivate, you can maximize the one and minimize the other. You also need to at least understand where your people are at and whether they're sitting at physiological, safety, social, self-esteem, etc., because that will influence how understanding them and how you will deal with it. So what are we saying there is that there's merit to both of these. However, neither of them are perfect. I can't say, okay, you just go and apply Herzberg and everyone will be happy, or you apply Maslow and everyone will be happy, but there's merit to both of those. Now, let's go back to practical terms and let's have a look. If you were the, Bantu, if we have a look at your question, if you were the manager of Aztec, right, and we spent a lot of time talking about Aztec and we know Aztec, tell me how you would, somebody must try and tell me how you would motivate the people in Aztec using Herzberg's theory. Okay, so you're manager of Aztec. We know Aztec. We know all of the problems in Aztec, production problems and maintenance problems and customer problems and planning problems and financial problems. Yeah.
I would basically first give recognition each and everyone, because they have been out there trying to do something, trying to make a change. So I'd make a recognition saying, even though the wheels are kind of falling off, at least you guys are being recognized for trying to make a difference at the end of the day.
Okay. All right. What is it? Tell me, explain that in terms of, tell me that in terms of Herzberg. Where does that apply?
On the motivational factor, by giving recognition.
Recognition would be appealing to a motivational factor. Yes, I can accept that. What else? Somebody else. What can you add? Silence. Okay, guys. All right, so let's have a look at it. Basically,
I was about to answer, actually.
sorry, what was that?
I was about to answer that one quickly.
Okay, go for it.
I would reduce, minimize what everybody, this thing of who must be fired, who must not be fired.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that I would personally just let it low down. Like, that's not what we're looking at right now.
Correct.
Firing people.
Yeah. Okay, so I think
that's one thing I would minimize from the Herzberg.
Cool. I like that, because bottom line is
minimize frustrations.
Yeah, frustrations. We're talking about people go home and bitch and moan. What do they complain about when they go home? They go home, hey, there's such a negative vibe. Everybody's each other. Everybody's trying to break each person down. You can see that's a hygiene factor. And I think that's a lovely example. Okay. Yep. So bottom line is, and you can't just stop that, but you can certainly try and say, come guys, we don't do this. Huh? We don't talk like this. You cannot talk like this. You kind of squash it as much as you can. So that would be a nice example of trying to address a hygiene factor. We've got an example of praise and recognition to maximize a motivational factor. But let's take a bit further. Any other ideas on Herzberg in Aztec? Ramasela,
I think on hygiene, hi Carl.
Yeah.
I think on hygiene factors is just to find out why are people unhappy? Why what's frustrating the staff?
Correct.
I think that's where I'd start. What is such a big problem? What's making you guys not understand each other? What is it that frustrates the staff? Because clearly on Herzberg, everybody is frustrated. There's just so many frustrations. So my first thing would be, what are the frustrations? Let's just list the frustrations.
That's right. But, and I agree with you, but let's say before we even ask them, we've already got an idea. What do you think are frustrating the people? Ramasela, you said, fix the machines, get production going.
Yes, the machines.
Policies,
Yeah, productivity.
So Paul, you're not wrong. You would want to speak to them, but I can go in there before I've even spoken to them. I'm pretty sure I know what must be bugging the hell out of these people. Basically, machines keep breaking down. I can't produce what I have to produce. When I do try and get machines working, the spares are not available. Then I don't have the raw materials in stock. My planning guy is tearing his hair out because the computer system doesn't work. You know what I mean? So the point that I'm making is that we can see 101 hygiene factors in ASTIC. There must be huge frustration in ASTIC. We've also heard, you know what I mean, Nettie, about the fact that people want to talk about who should be hired and fired. There's a negative vibe. The machines don't work. The spares are not there. The computer's not working. People are not talking to each other. Job descriptions, etc., etc. So the point that I'm making to try and answer the question, so how would one use this or answer this in practical terms in an exam, is if I had to say, you are the manager of ASTIC, tell me how you would motivate the people in ASTIC, and you must make reference to a theory covered on the program. A theory you could use would be Herzberg's. Guys, does that make sense?
Yes.
But if I asked you that question and you said Herzberg, you've got to show me that you've understood Herzberg. Right? You've got to be able to say, well, I would use Herzberg. What does that mean? Minimize hygiene, maximize motivational. Let me give you an example. I think a hygiene factor would be the machines, the breakdowns, the lack of raw material, the spares, the computer system. Then when I'm reading your answer, I'm saying, aha, clearly you understood Herzberg. Clearly you can relate Herzberg's to ASTIC and you understand what are the hygiene factors in ASTIC. All right? Coming back to the praise and the recognition, Roxy, is when you're reading those letters in ASTIC, you get no impression of anything positive. Hey? It's all just negative. There's no praise, there's no encouragement you can see. You know what I mean? So there's no motivational factors, but there's 101 hygiene factors. Is that answering the question of how one would use this in reality in ASTIC?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And remember, if I said to you, how would you motivate people in ASTIC, that doesn't mean that Herzberg is the only theory. It's one theory, right? But you can see how you would be able to apply it fairly in reality. Okay. Bantu, have I answered your question? Okay. Hopefully I have.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Now let's take it a bit further. So we can see practically how we would use Herzberg in ASTIC. Now let's try another one. Tell me about Maslow in ASTIC. And sorry, the important point is I'm asking you how you would motivate your managers, your team in ASTIC. The people that report to you, I don't know, what were their names? John Davies, Kobus Taron, Leon Fenter, that layer. How would you tell me about Maslow in terms of that layer?
Well, Carl, if we're looking at the ASTIC, or if we have to compare it to Maslow, everybody's very concerned about the safety and the security. So, you know, them having the idea that there's going to be retrenchments, to them there's no security, there's no safety whatsoever. So in order for us to give motivation on using the Maslow's hierarchy, we would have to try introduce some safety and security by ensuring that we're not looking at any retrenchments.
Okay, cool. I think that's a nice answer. Bottom line is, if it wasn't for, remember the general manager sent a letter saying we must consider retrenchment, a major retrenchment exercise. And already the union is talking about it, right? So if we look at that, well then yes, you could be saying there is probably some fear around jobs. That is going to be a hygiene factor because, sorry, not a hygiene, it's going to apply to Maslow because that is your basic level. It's your physiological, it is your safety level. Typically, however, so I take that and I think that's a very valid point. If, however, we looked typical company like an ASTIC, I would probably, if you had to say to me, Carl, would you rather use Herzberg or Maslow? For your immediate managers, I would probably go for Herzberg rather than Maslow. And I'm not saying I'm right, but why? Because those managers probably have got food on their table. They've probably got a safe place to stay. They probably have a sense of belonging. those managers are probably sitting at that belonging and or self-esteem. Right? If I was trying to motivate the operators in ASTIC, those people who are working on the machines, all right, there I would possibly say Maslow has more relevance. If I'm looking at my immediate management team in ASTIC, well, then I would probably say I would use Herzberg rather than Maslow. That doesn't mean that Maslow is wrong. It just means that I would probably prefer the one or the other. However, Roxy, your point is valid. If there is a leak or there's rumors at the management level of possible retrenchment, well, then you're going to find people will be very unsettled. Guys, is this making sense?
Carl, just a
Yes.
question from my side.
Yeah.
You know, for the second one where we looking at the STEC trying to use, and not us, but who's the other one? The other model? Where we're looking at,
Maslow.
yeah, the one that we're looking at hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, does it, hierarchy of needs, is it always supposed to be the basic needs, safety, self-esteem? What if maybe I might say, for STEC, maybe on the top of their list, maybe something that we must look at is the working condition, and then use Maslow's model for that one, and start there as my starting point.
Yeah, so if we were looking at working condition, then I would be probably going more towards Herzberg than to Maslow, although Maslow would be saying that sort of sense of safety and that sense of belonging. Working conditions would probably go with that sense of belonging, right? In other words, are fighting and they're stabbing each other in the back. That's where you would see Maslow, but I would probably be going more towards Herzberg if we're looking at working conditions, because then you're talking about hygiene factors.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay.
Does it make sense, Professor? Okay.
Yeah.
So guys, what am I trying to say? It's not about a right or wrong. It's about, hey, you know what I mean? You could use this theory, you could use that theory. In my view, one makes more sense than the other, but I wouldn't say you were wrong to try and use Maslow, but you better explain to me how those guys sitting at your management team are worried about food on the table. But Roxy's view is if there were rumors of retrenchment, that's valid. But the key issue is there's not a right or wrong answer, but there is a question of about being able to justify your answer and explain your answer. Okay. So far making sense?
Yes.
Okay. Right. What else do I want to say on this? Basically, that's it. I think we need to take a break now. We've been going for almost an hour. So I think you guys need to take a break. Colette, I see you've been out and in, and are you back with us? Colette? No, she disappeared and then she came back. Okay, guys, before we take a break, just a quick question. Is this working for you, this whole process?
Yes, it is.
Yes,
It is.
it is.
It is.
Okay, this is working pretty well for me. I've got a couple of people that seem to get lost and then I have to bring them back in or let them back in. So some people clearly are battling with some stuff, but I'm happy that we keep going if this seems to be working. So let's take a break. It is now, what it is now, 9:35. Let's say 1/4 to just 10 minutes. Body break, comfort break, smoke break, whatever it is. And then we're back at 1/4 to 10. Is that okay?
Okay, cool, cool.
Awesome.
Okay, great.
Nah.